I cannot express to you guys right now how excited I am to be reading this book. So, The Sun and the Star by Rick Riordan and Mark Oshiro finally went onto the reading service that I use to read my books, which means that I can finally read it after how many months? May, June, July, August? 4 months of waiting to read this. Oh my gosh, I finally have my hands on it. I'm so excited. I didn't appreciate the first time that I read Percy Jackson the relationship between Will Solis and Nico D'Angelo. And when I reread it last year and a little bit into this year, I fell in love, especially in the Trials of Apollo. And I cannot wait to see what's going to happen in their own little story. I'm so excited. Also, it's not very often that two kind of side characters end up getting their own story. I know that Nico became a main character after the House of Hades and during it as well, but Will was definitely a side character, and so to see these two get their own story is so exciting. I swear to God, if Will dies, I'm gonna be so freaking pissed. So we get introduced to the story, and Will is sitting there bandaged while he is bleeding profusely, and a nymph has asked Nico to tell her and Will a story while she tries to help Will. And he's like, "Tell you a story? What do you mean a story?" And Will is weakly grabbing for Nico's hand, and oh my god, if he dies, I'm gonna be so pissed. So I hope he doesn't, but that's how we've started the story. And now we're on to chapter 1. Here we go. Austin and Kayla have left Camp Half Blood. Kayla is going to Toronto, and her brother is going to Manhattan to spend time with their respective parents. Kayla is going to see Apollo, and her brother is going to see his mom in Manhattan. And Will and Nico are staying at Camp Half Blood with Chiron, and they're the only ones left. Everyone else has left, probably to go back to school. It sounds like it's around the fall time, so everyone has left, and Will and Nico are trying to decide how to occupy their time until dinner because Chiron has a meeting with the Dryads talking about tree rot. And we have our first pet name, you guys. We have our first pet name, much to Nico's annoyance. And Will says, "That's a funny joke," Will said as they reach the summit. "What is?" "You," said Will, "being happy." Nico rolled his eyes. "My grumpy little ball of darkness," added Will, poking him in the ribs. "Ew, gross," said Nico, dancing away from him. "We are not making that a thing." "Did you already forget that I was once your," and I'm quoting you here, Nico, "significant annoyance?" "Oh, and you're still that," said Nico, and then Will was chasing him down the hill, back into camp. In that moment, Nico allowed himself to enjoy the sensation. Will was right. There was no threats whatsoever on the horizon. No big bads, no lurking demigod traitors, no hidden monsters waiting to destroy Camp Half-Blood. But then dread pricked Nico's skin. His body was warning him, wasn't it? "Don't get too comfortable," it was telling him. "He's waiting for you in Tartarus, or have you forgotten about him, like everyone else did?" Maybe this period of rest wasn't a good thing. If Nico didn't have some terrible monster or villain to fight, then what excuse did he have to ignore the voice any longer? The truth was, he couldn't ignore it even if he wanted to. He'd been visited by so many ghosts over the years. The dead wanted to be heard, and who better to listen to them than the son of Hades? But this voice, it did not belong to someone who had passed on, and Nico had never heard someone sound as desperate for help. I read a little bit more than I intended, but we have our first pet name, and I'm so excited. Oh, pet names. When they're good, I enjoy them. Also, if you have forgotten, what Nico is referencing here is Bob the Titan, for some reason, has been calling out to him, and we don't know why. So that's what this whole adventure is about. So let's see what happens next. Oh my god, this is so interesting. So I have read several of Rick Riordan's books by now. I started with Percy Jackson and have read all of his series to the Trials of Apollo. And we've never really dealt with PTSD or the trauma that I am sure the demigods have endured because of the quests that they've gone on. However, in this book, we are addressing Nico's PTSD that he has been having ever since Jason died. And I'm very curious to see where it's going to go. So far, all he's done is he's talked to Will about it. And Will, to his credit, he's trying his best, but he isn't really experienced with the underworld and it kind of creeps him out. So he was very sympathetic and he listened to what Nico had to say about the dreams that he's been having about people from the underworld. But he's like, look, like, I don't know that much about dreams. Have you tried talking to Mr. D? And Nico's like, are you serious? Mr. D, of all people. And he's like, yeah, I mean, he's a god. He knows how visions and dreams work. Why don't you go talk to him? And so Nico talked to him, and Mr. D is actually helping him and giving him good advice, which is a first because, as we know, Mr. D is kind of flippant and is angry because he doesn't want to be stuck at Camp Half-Blood. But anyway, he told Nico, we have to get to the bottom of these dreams and what they mean. So I need you to report to me about your dreams. And please don't have any boring dreams. So we've been doing that for a couple weeks, I think. The timeline is a bit fuzzy in this book. And Nico has not been eating, which is very interesting because sometimes when you're depressed, you don't feel like eating. And so Mr. D is trying to get him to eat. He's like, I know you're used to being hungry, but just because that's what you're used to doesn't mean that's good for you. And I know you're half god, but still, you're also part human. Eating is good for you. Please try to eat something. In order for your mind to heal, your body must also heal. So that's where we're at currently. Mr. D is trying to get him to eat and all the things. It is a cold, rainy day, and so I am gonna curl up in bed with my book, but I have to catch you up on a few things before we jump into chapter 6, so let's get started. A lot of things have happened. First, we had Nico's dreams, and in these dreams, we went back to several scenes that happened in Trials of Apollo, as well as a couple scenes that happened in the Heroes of Olympus series. And in these dreams, people were telling him, you have to listen, you have to listen. And they kept repeating it, and he was really confused as to what was going on. And then he got startled awake because apparently in his dreams he was screaming, and so Will came to wake him up, and he said, can I hold you? Would that be okay? Shame burned Nico's cheeks. He didn't like Will seeing him so vulnerable, but he nodded because what he needed overrode his pride. Will pulled him close, and Nico quietly cried into his boyfriend's chest. It's all right. Will ran his hand up and down Nico's back. They were just dreams. But were they? Nico thought. Before he could tell any of the details, the door to the cabin burst open. Chiron stood there, his eyes wide. Oh no, have I interrupted something? Nico pulled away from Will and wiped his face with the back of his hand. No, it's okay, he said. We were just talking. Well, that's fine, said Chiron awkwardly. I'm sorry to barge in so late at night, but we have an emergency. So, what is this emergency, you may ask? Well, Rachel Elizabeth Dare has showed up to give Nico his prophecy that we heard at the very end of the Trials of Apollo, and this is what she says. Go forth and find the one who calls out your name, who suffers and despairs for refusing to remain. There, leave something of equal value behind, or your body and soul no one will find. After hearing this prophecy, Nico knows what he must do in terms of who he must help, and that is Bob the Titan. The only problem is that Bob the Titan is still stuck in the underworld from the House of Hades. And so we must travel to the underworld yet again. And his father is closed off the underworld. So guess we're gonna have a problem. But Nico says, that's not a problem. I'll just go down there. And Will is like, no way. Not alone you aren't. And Nico is scared because of the last line in the prophecy saying that they must leave something of equal value behind, but Will has insisted on coming, so the two of them are going to travel to the underworld together, and we're gonna see what happens. Chiron doesn't want them to go because not only is the underworld dangerous, but also because, as camp tradition states, there has to be 3 to sanction a quest, and there's only 2 of them, Nico and Will. And Nico's like, I've thought about that. I know it's dangerous, but Percy and Annabeth did it, and so can we, because Bob really needs our help, and once we help Bob, there will be 3 of us. Before I continue reading, there are 2 things that I want to address, and that is Mr. D's humor through all of this, and also the new nickname we have for Nico. Mr. D, he's just here for comedic relief, isn't he? Clearly, Mr. D wasn't as interested in that part since he'd heard all about it already. Instead of listening, he continually tossed popcorn into the air and tried to catch it in his mouth. He missed. A lot. Which Nico took as proof that he was not the god of hand-eye coordination. After Nico tells them about all of his dreams, they discuss what they're gonna do, and Chiron, as I said earlier, is very opposed to this quest, and Nico says, what options do I have at this point? Nico growled. Wait until my nightmares get so bad my head explodes? Wait until Rachel is spewing that prophecy 24 hours a day? Would not be my first choice, Rachel admitted. I must say, however, Mr. D interjected, this is better than any human film I've ever seen. The drama, the twists. I should have made a second bowl of popcorn. Oh my gosh. Mr. D, why? Why do you have to say things like that? Okay, going on to Nico's new nickname, Will has agreed to go to the underworld with him, and Nico's like, no way, this is not happening. You're not coming with me. I can do this by myself. And Will says, excuse me, noble McSacrifice, Will said. We're both perfectly capable of survival. Chiron's hooves clapped nervously on the floorboards. But a child of Apollo in Tartarus. Will's face fell. I can manage. Nico squeezed his hand. Will, you're a child of the sun, where I'm going. There's no sunlight down there. I know that seems obvious, but it's a lot worse than you're probably picturing. The true nature of Tartarus. I never want you to have to experience that. We are now calling Nico Noble McSacrifice. I have no idea how many of these nicknames are coming, but I find them funny. Speaking of Nico's concern for Will, Will tries to comfort him and says, hey, Will squeezed his hand. This isn't some hero play I'm trying to make. I promise you right here and now, Nico, I'm not going to trade myself for Bob, and you're not going to have to make that choice. Nico's jaw dropped. What? That's what you're worried about, isn't it? You think the prophecy is suggesting that one of us will have to stay behind to save Bob, right? Nico's mouth was still hanging open. I do know you, Nico, said Will, and I'm telling you, that's not going to happen. With assurances from Will that we're not going to leave him down there as a sacrifice, and Chiron's blessing, we now have an officially sanctioned quest. I've made it to chapter 10 now, and we've talked to Percy and Annabeth, trying to give Will advice on how to survive the underworld, and their best advice was to hold on to each other, since Nico and Will are going together, and that's how Percy and Annabeth survived, is holding on to each other and reminding each other of the world above when things got hard. So that was really their only advice for them. We have now made it to the banks of the river Styx, and it was difficult because we had to traverse the ground 3 different times. They made it to the entrance of the underworld and went down the long staircase, and then for some reason the underworld popped them back up to the entrance twice, and Nico is starting to wonder if this is his father's doing, since his father closed the gates of the underworld. However, they have finally made it, and we are also doing a back and forth thing, so we're going to the present where Will is hurt and the nymph is trying to save them, and then we're going to the past and talking about their quest. We are also telling the nymph stories in order to get access to a boat, which I believe will take them deeper into the underworld. I'm not sure. All I know so far is that we're trying to get a boat, and telling her stories in exchange for getting that boat. So we talked about how Nico and Will first met, and also when they knew that they were friends, as well as telling their current adventure as a story to get the boat. Will has now passed out, and he was trying to fight the effects of the underworld, but he did not win, and he has now passed out. So Nico is gonna try to take care of him, I think, but he's very concerned because Will should not be feeling the effects of the underworld this soon. Nico's starting to feel them a little bit, but he's been able to push through. So if he's feeling them this soon, this adventure could get very sketchy very, very fast. After Will passed out, he had this nightmare that Nico jumped into the river Styx and that he had to jump into the river Styx after him, and Nico kept taunting him that he was too slow and gave up on the quest and all these other things. Turns out that it was caused by a monster by the name of Epials, and he was responsible for causing this nightmare, and then he made Nico also have a nightmare where he relived the day that Percy told him that Bianca died. However, Nico was able to fight through it and realize that it wasn't real, it was just a nightmare, and so he faced down the monster, and he asked him if he was the one that had been creating the nightmares all along, and the monster said no. So we don't know who created the nightmares in the beginning of the story, but we're about to find out because he said that we would find out soon. Also, Will just did some really cool stuff. He was able to get rid of the monster by blasting him with light, since that is Will's power. So maybe that's how they'll survive in the underworld. We now have a new nickname for Will, which is Care Bear, since he was able to get rid of the monster. And Nico said, "You're a legitimate demigod Care Bear." Will's top lip trembled. He fell to his knees. Then he bent over in loud, raucous laughter until tears poured from his eyes. "You're so weird." Nico crawled over, pulled Will to him, and silenced his laughter with a tender kiss. "Please keep being my own personal Care Bear, though." "Always," said Will. And then he promptly passed out. I swear, Will keeps passing out because he passed out at the end of chapter 10, and we are now on chapter 12, and he just passed out again. He just keeps pulling a Jason Grace, I swear. Anyway, I find it cute that they now have nicknames, both of them, rather than just Nico. And it is true. Will is such a Care Bear, and it's cute. It is also part of his nature, and I love that so far he's staying true to his nature, even though Tartarus is rough and is trying to erode your personality and who you used to be. It's been a while since I've updated you, but I've read several chapters now, and we learned what happened when Nico tried to close the doors of death in the House of Hades. He got the 3 pomegranate seeds from Nemesis, and then he got trapped by her mother, Nyx, and Nyx ended up giving him away to the giants that captured him in the House of Hades. And we learn that Nyx hates him because, according to Will, Nyx hates you because you represent change. Hal Smith nodded wisely, or at least the potential for it. Hallow Smith is one of the troglodytes because we have now made it to the troglodytes' home, and we're asking for the troglodytes' help in order to get to Tartarus. On our way to Tartarus, Will and Nico met one of the workers that works for Hades and helps make ambrosia in the underworld, and he has asked Will and Nico to grab something from Persephone's garden so that he can give it to his significant other. The thing that they decide to grab are pomegranates because they're Persephone's prized fruit. However, they have to get in and out of her garden without getting caught, and they almost did it. They grabbed the pomegranates, etc., etc., but then she caught them and she had a nice little chat with Will. Will had to tell her about the quest and why they were in her garden, and then she said, "You know," she continued, "I haven't always treated Nico as he deserves to be treated. It was hard for me to look upon him. His very face reminded me that Hades had betrayed me and had a child with someone else." Persephone maintained her smile, but it did not reach her eyes. "We gods can be very jealous, you know." Will nodded, afraid to speak. "But over the years, and especially recently, I've had to re-examine my perception of Nico. He is not always what he seems. There is more to that boy than what I saw on the surface." Despite his galloping nerves, Will found his voice. "I know that," he said. "It's been the best part of knowing him. How often he surprises you." But do you see the depths within him?" She gazed intently into Will's eyes. "Do you realize who he really is?" Persephone gives Will one last piece of advice, and she says, "There cannot be light without darkness, nor darkness without light. You must have the contrast for both to exist." She helped Will stand, and he passed the stone back to her. "But with Nico, it's hard, Persephone. I want the best for him, and he seems to disappear into his darkness, like he's hiding in a place where he doesn't want my light." "Then why not offer him your darkness?" It was a simple question, but once again Will felt like he'd been knocked flat. He stood there, slightly ashamed that he had not considered meeting Nico on his own level before, and also frightened about what it might mean to do so. "I cannot tell you how to love someone, Will." For the first time, Persephone sounded sympathetic. "But as I said before, it is a difficult choice. You have to choose to continue loving someone. Feelings aren't enough." I loved this piece of advice because it is so true. You have to choose to love somebody every day and meet them where they're at, because that's how they feel heard and understood. And sometimes, even though you want the best for someone, when you try to push them beyond where they're at currently, you push them away rather than pulling them closer like you intended. Also, Will got Meet the Parents Part 1, because no, we didn't meet Hades, but we met Persephone. And Nico had mentioned previously how he wanted Will to meet both Hades and Persephone. So, it definitely happened. The other thing that we learned was how Nico and Will started dating. Nico had seen Will looking at him when Nico helped in the infirmary after the end of Heroes of Olympus, and so he decided that he wanted to pluck up the courage and ask Will on a date, and so he asked Grover's significant other to help him, and instead of organizing a small, intimate picnic, she thought that he meant a party, and so she threw this whole entire party. Therefore, instead of asking Will on a date privately and confessing that he liked him in a private setting, he had to tell everyone at camp that he was gay, and he realized in the moment that he did want to tell everybody that he was gay because he didn't want to hide part of himself. He wanted to be open and honest with his friends and family. He also confessed that that's why he was so afraid to meet Cupid in the Heroes of Olympus series, because he didn't want to be forced to come out, and so Cupid forcing him to admit to Jason that he was gay made him really uncomfortable. In the present day, we have now told the nymph enough stories that we have now gained passage on the boat. I don't know where that boat is taking them, but we have finally gained passage on the boat and are making our way out of the underworld, I would presume. I thought that I was going to have time to finish the story and upload a complete reading vlog, but I don't. So I'm going to upload part 1, and then a part 2 will be coming later in the year, probably towards November, December. I hope you enjoyed part 1, and until next time.